Is my screen showing the presentation, Wayne or Bernie?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, brilliant. Thank you all. Well, let's talk through. My name's Ian Adams. I'm the drug diagnostic lead for HMPPS, and part of my role going into different prisons of all categories and looking what the problems are and what a consistent theme is from myself and Wayne and Bernie. Let them introduce themselves in a second. Is in relation to PS, and it's becoming more and more of an issue in prisons and very much linked to organised crime, and we'd like to explore that with this session with you. But my colleagues Wayne and Bernie, all part of the diagnostic team as well, let me just introduce themselves for a second. So Bernie, do you want to go first?
Yes, good morning everyone. I'm Bernie Gloppen. I'm a detective superintendent attached to the team on secondment. I've been with the team for about a year and I assist the team on diagnostic visits, providing advice and support around crime and policing matters.
Wayne, do you introduce yourself, sir?
Hi, good morning everyone. Yeah, Wayne Podgy is part of the drug strategy and delivery team, and I lead on operational support and linking regional drug leads forums together. As Ian said, we carry out diagnostic visits and part of that is looking at the impact of psychoactive substances in prisons. So I'll let Ian carry on. Cheers.
Thank you. So I'm going to go through a few slides, and then break off and take any questions and have discussions with you. Because this is an area, although we're talking in prisons, it affects communities, and we'll explore that as we go. And it's very much an unknown or a slight maybe ignorance around it. So I'll just give you sort of a brief history of what we know. PS, or Spice and Mamba, began to appear in the open estate around about 2010, and up until 2015 it was tended to be for the open estate. But then we started in 2015 to 2018, it became a real problem in the closed estate. Had a herbal appearance, but we started to get some quite serious incidents taking place in prisons. Then in 2018 we had the smoking ban in our prisons, and PS, obviously when it was in the herbal form, it changed to be manufactured in a liquid form and start to become impregnated into male. In 2018 the problem was recognised, and our team was formed initially as the drugs task force to start looking into the problems of why we having so many issues around drugs that at the time we didn't really know was PS. And then then of course the COVID pandemic hit. And whereas we'll explore through the business model in a second, but resulted in an alteration in the chemical makeup of the drug and reduced the potency because people were dying. And as if you want a business model and you want to smuggle drugs in, the last thing you want to be doing is killing your clients. So the chemical makeup of it was changed, and throughout the COVID, let's say years, probably 18 months, even still now as we're now coming into recovery, the potency was reduced and still had the knockout effect, and hence the term bird killer was born. So this is sort of where we are now. But the big question we ask is, what are psychoactive substances? And I mean, types of PS include anti-synthetic stimulants, cannabinoids, benzodiazepines, opioids, hallucinogenics, dissociatives. Now, synthetic cannabinoid receptor agonists, or SCRAs, SCRAs, are the most prevalent of the types of PS used in custody. And this is due to the low cost and the self-medicating effects and basically easing the pain of prison life, which if you link that to what we talked about during the COVID regime, there's only so much Hones Under the Hammer you can watch. Prisoners were bored, and let's be frank, we were all scared. And certainly I was deployed back to HMP Liverpool at the time. We didn't know what this disease was. We didn't know what this pandemic was. We thought everybody had it. We didn't want to speak to people. We kept our distance. And you put yourself in the prisoners, they're behind the door. Originally it was 23.5 hours a day. So during that time, what else are you going to do but actually come for it? Wayne, could you do that lobby thing for me? So synthetic cannabinoids, which act as SCRAs, commonly known as Spice. They mimic the effects of THC, the psychoactive component in cannabis, but due to the lack of CBD,
it's a bit quieter.
Oh, Ian, I think you've muted.
Yeah, Ian, you've got on mute.
okay, which part did I go on mute? We're talking about scars, and then let's go back to it. Drugs have been in prison for as long as we know. They will continue to be there, but with the smoking ban coming in, drugs have changed. So we're not, whereas if somebody smokes cannabis in a prison now, it's quite easily identifiable where it's coming from. Hence why we've changed to the scars and the effects which they've been having. So that's a brief. So what are the risks associated with PS? Well, straight away in capital letters, and we could do it bigger, I would, it's death. Prisoners using scars, using PS are dying. We are having deaths in custody as reported most week and coming out and related to this. We're also having deaths after release because we did go through a stage where we were storing, one of our countermeasures we talk about is mail. We were storing mail and giving it to prisoners on release, and we had a spate of deaths in the summer of prisoners straight after release in relation to this. Other risks associated to us are violence. We've had some extreme violence on individuals, staff assaults, but we've also had quite some serious disorder in prisons, and that's related to PS. And you've seen, I'm not going to show you the videos, but there's some videos out there online which have come out of prisoners who are clearly under the influence and doing some quite strange things, not only to each other but to property. However, as mentioned as well, drugs affects everybody differently, and high rates of self-harm, not only just to the drug use, but actually linking into debt and to pressures put on them. So I'm just going to stop sharing for a second. We're back in the room, and I want to open up to you guys. Has anybody got any experience of PS they'd like to share? Claire, straight away, come in.
Hiya, yeah, I work for a substance misuse service and work predominant criminal justice system for too many years. Let's say, give me age away.
21,
So,
Claire, come on, we know that.
So when we're talking about death, are we talking it's an attributing factor, or are we talking like a poisoning effect? Because what we saw in the community around that time, when we had drugs like Spice in the community, we saw a lot of our opiate users switch to Spice because it gave that feeling of not being in reality. We had that, and then when they made it illegal and Spice wasn't as good, it was more more expensive, sorry, they switched back to opiates because it was a cheaper drug. So I suppose my question is, when we're talking about death, are we talking about the effects that some of these drugs are having on the body in like an overdose, or are we talking attributing factors to death?
We're actually talking both.
Right.
And what's coming out of coroner's reports, toxicology reports, is that the actual, because the substance is consistently changing, we can't put it down exactly what it is. But the consistent theme which is coming out, and we've got somebody from PPO on here explaining with the reports coming out, the direct link to scars. So we call it Spice, Mamba, scars. Spice tends to be the accepted term. Related to death is coming out quite a lot, and certainly on coroners, particularly in the early days, where when prisoners were practically running around naked and jumping off landings and into posts. But as the drug has changed, and particularly throughout the COVID times, prisoners are overdosing under the influence, and they're not knowing, because there's no, you get medication, it goes through different checks. They don't know what they're taking, but there's the common theme which is coming out certainly in prevalence studies, that it's the direct link to that, and that is it's the unknown. And so the links, Claire, what you're saying there, from the early days when it was in the community, it's now going more to a custodial drug. And that's the concern, is that it's continually changing, that where we try and offer support or where we can get a right correct antidote for it, it changes. So we're moving again. Does that answer your question? Ish,
yeah. I suppose it's, what are the physical impacts of scars, I suppose, because we have seen deaths in the community, but it's been part of, say, an opiate overdose, where there's potentially opiate overdose, cannibal spice, maybe methadone, diazepam. So it's been an accumulation of that impact on your respiratory system and the nervous system. So I think that's kind of where I wanted to go with that. Is the scars, are they overpowering the nervous system and the respiratory system? Is that's what's causing death?
we actually don't know.
Oh.
I mean, Wayne, you mean that's how we're finding a different mix, but what we'll find is the common link is there's a SCRA in there, and it's different. So there's so many strands of this, it's difficult to put down, and that's one of the issues which the coroners are having. And when speaking, and we do with the investigation team with PPO, is saying just stop it. Well, because it's far difficult. The whole world is the currency of the world is drugs, and what we're seeing is the shift to the synthetic market now. And you know, they haven't reached our shores as much yet, but when the fentanyl start arriving, and you know, we've got quite a major issue. And one of the parts we're exploring is, you know, since the smoking ban, and we're now going to chemically sprayed onto paper, and what else is impacting that. That's why it's good to have this conversation now, because we don't have the answer. This is about raising awareness. What we do know is that we can't attribute to one particular thing, but we know in terms of prisons and intelligence in prisons, most of your traditional drugs are not there. It is the SCRAs which we're finding, and the impact as well, because we've had lockdown and we've not been seeing our prisoners for the past 18 months to 2 years. We actually not really know what the symptoms they're having. So that's why, you know, we talk about the impact of PS on prisons is so vast, because some prisons still don't believe there's a problem. Still don't think it's there, and that's down to different factors which we'll explore a little bit later in this presentation. But great question. I'm sorry I can't give you the nail-on answer, because the fact is we don't know, and that's because PS is consistently changing. We're constantly adapting and playing catch-up. And as I said, that'll become a bit more evidence as we go through today. But thanks for the question, Claire. Really appreciate that. Do you have anybody else any questions? Come on, stick your hands up. Don't be shy.
Yeah, Ian, Phil Dyer from Bullingdon.
Hi, Phil.
Just in relation to the death question, I know you said it's often a kind of cocktail of different things that are causing the deaths. Are there any figures on kind of comparative deaths with other drugs? Is kind of NPS top of the tree, or are opiates kind of a bigger killer? Is there any kind of comparative data on that?
There's only loose data, and another data saying that opiates are actually not as much available as they were. PS is the overwhelming drug in prisons, and the problem we have with Phil is our reporting's poor.
Yeah.
So we can only actually deal with what we've got in front of us, you know. And we've got the NEAC team are consistently going through IRS data. That's in incident reporting system. Sorry, you guys are not on HMPPS, the incident reports, and we're not finding the opiates. The predominant drug of choice is SCRAs and PS.
Thank you.
Wayne?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that there is a piece of work ongoing at the moment. So a member of our team, Caroline Bonds, is working with the PPO office to go back over deaths in custody and following release, and see if SCRAs or any other substance has played a part in that. Because as Ian said, the fact is we weren't actually asking the questions about whether there was drug use involved in certain deaths that have happened. So Caroline's doing that piece of work. So we're hoping that can be published soon, Phil.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Let's go back to sharing my screen. And just confirm for me guys we're sharing again.
Yeah.
Okay. So the known PS journey, and again this for relating to prisons at the moment, is it's coming in through domestic mail. That's the main point, and that's all intelligence speaking to prison staff, and what we're finding is that's the main starting point. So it's sprayed on letters and posted into prisons. When we start doing something about that, the next step becomes legal mail and Rule 39 and confidential access. This causes us a slightly more of a problem in relation because of the confidential access that we can't open. Now, there's things we can do. We'll explore more on countermeasures as we go this. The next point on the known PS journey is clothing, socks and boxes handed in on visits, or clothing allowed to be sent in. Now, every prisoner has 28 days from sentencing to get clothes in. That's in policy to give in. But it's when we allow further packages sent in free on that, starts causing us a bit of an issue because it is sprayed on clothing as well as paper. And then our big risk, which is we are aware of and there's work going on at the moment in terms of gathering evidence, is books. Now, as a service, we lost a judicial review, and that we have to allow books sent in by family and friends. And as you can imagine, if we're talking spraying on paper, that's quite a bit of an issue. But that's starting to emerge at the moment from our horizon scanning. And some prisons who are putting countermeasures into the first three are seeing a spike in books being sent in. So it's clearly that avenue is starting to take effect. But we have to link it to organised crime. And the reasons for is that PS is cheap to produce, highly addictive, it evades our countermeasures, captive audience. Sorry, wait, can you start that one again? Somebody in the lobby. Strong link to debt, county lines, and it's lucrative. Now I want to explore these points individually now, and then we'll have a discussion about it again. So let's start with the production. China is the largest producer of scars, and it costs £80 per kilo. Bought on the dark web, using VPN for anonymity. Mixed with acetones and solvents. So we had the legal highs 2004 to up to about 2015. Black Mamba, Exodus, K2 Spice. They were all produced, sold in Blackpool and seaside resorts, etc. And it's distributed in the same way as cannabis and other drugs. That's getting, there's people out there dealing. Now, there is no intelligence currently that scars are produced in the UK. Likely due to the cost effectiveness and ease where it can be sourced from China. Now, if we just think about that for a second. Your local drug dealer down the park, do they have contacts in China? Again, I've been realistic. It's got to be imported in as well. It is likely that OCG's importing PS into the UK do so via European hubs, where the drugs are repackaged, redistributed as a means to avoid detection from the country of origin. So on the criminal side of it, we're already starting to evade different methods of things coming in. Most PS enters the UK via the postal system after being purchased. So production-wise, it's easy to get it over. It's easy to get it into the country. So let's go to the next part. It's highly addictive. Takes effect quite quickly. Creates a zombie-like state. You know, in the old days, we used to see prisoners hanging around just in a comatose state. You know, times when prisoners were extreme violent and then would appear all the vital signs are gone. Then all of a sudden they'd jump up and start fighting us again. Currently known as bird killer, as it knocks prisoners out for days. And and we'll discuss in a second why we've not really picked that up. There's a potentially long-lasting effect. The cannabinoids create a feeling of relaxation. Unfortunately, guys, it's easily available, and that's one of our big issues. And in relation to the question from second ago from Claire, it's replacing traditional drugs such as cannabis. As a criminal, it's evading our countermeasures. The chemical structure of scars or spice allows for new variants to be created, which resulted in them evading HMPPS trace detection equipment and MDT panels for considerable amounts of time, allowing their conveyance to go undetected and undisrupted. 44% of substance detected in an October 21 prevalent study would not trigger a positive MDT on the current panel. MDT guides its mandatory drug testing, which one of our countermeasures in identifying drugs in prisons. And as with mailroom itemizers, strains of PS become available in custody is not matched to our speed of updating trace detection equipment and MDT. It was described last week as an arms race. And this is why when we're looking at what's the problems in relation to PS, as you can see, it's becoming a business person's dream. Now, of course, we're a captive audience with prisoners. And National Crime Agency are aware of the PS threat. All intelligence suggests it's manufactured for the prison market. We tried to explore some of the work which Bernie and I are doing to raise awareness in relation, because although it might be prison market, it's clearly being imported internationally. It is now an emerging drug in approved premises, which is quite interesting. And some of the work we're doing around APs, we're starting to find that trend coming in now, but we're still not finding it in the wider community. Wayne leads on ADA for us in HMPPS and certain drug strategy, and what we're finding from the ADA regions is that they're reporting an awareness of PS, but minimal arrests and crime being recorded in relation to PS use. Again, more indicating, and from intelligence from other regions, it's a prison drug, prison market. Now, boredom's been recognised as a driver for PS use, and that's part of our work with diagnostics, is looking at what's the offer in prisons. And you know, we've been locked up for 18 months. COVID has really created a problem and created a lot of prisoners who are addicted to this drug, and that's mainly due to COVID, which makes it quite difficult for us. And well, as mentioned there, recent regime restrictions has fueled the drug. And again, we can't ignore that. Now, we've got a strong link to debt. During lockdown, it was reported that prisoners would put sheets of paper under a cell door. If the occupant smoked the paper, they would be charged for smoking it. If the person didn't smoke it, they would be charged rent. We're now starting to talk ruthless work here. Prisons with a PS problem report increased assaults on staff and prisoners. There's also been reports of sexual assaults to pay off PS debt. A general recommendation from us as a drug strategy team, it's a link with debt management strategy. If you haven't got one, we'll put you in contact with people to do that. We are working very much with the safety team, hand in hand, recognising that this is a massive problem and as people's lives are being put at risk here. Because we're linking to county lines. Particularly PS debts are quite easy to incur. I'll show you, you'll see in the slide in the next second. Families are being targeted and pressured into pay off debts. And this is starting to come through now intelligence wise. But prisoners on licence and in open conditions are being pressured and offered vast amounts of money to convey PS into the closed estate. Now you, a prisoner, you've worked hard to get to Cat D, or you've been released on licence conditions. The temptation of money, and if you put that into factors of where we are now as a country, the political position we're in, cost of living is astronomical at the moment. People looking for a way out, quick money, quick debt, but actually looking to also get away from what's happening. So we really are in a bit of a vicious cocktail at the moment. And also what we do know is prisoners attending court are pressured to convey items into custody, and notably wearing impregnated clothing if they're only going to be sent down. And that's what we know. It's so much what we don't know. Because you actually look at the price of it. The national average, if you think it was £80 for a kilogram in China, the national average price of a sheet of A4 paper is £1,000. Now that's an average. The national average for an ID card size paper, £50. And for the stamp size, £5. Where the stamp size becomes relevant because it's smoked in vapes. So I want to discuss that for a second and stop sharing again. So as you can see, what we're talking about here with the impact of spice on prisons, it's prisons, community, it's organised crime. We're destroying lives. We've really got to wake up and do something about this. Does anybody have any questions of where we're at so far, please? Come on, let's have a discussion. I'd say you're all on mute. Come on.
Ian, Bernie here. I think it's a good starting point just to reiterate how impactful spice is, and the fact that it's related to saving lives.
Yeah,
that's what this all comes down to. It's an invisible risk, it's an invisible threat. There's still a lot that people need to know about it, and until that is determined, we face a real challenge, and that has an impact on people's lives. And we're aware of occasions where people have lost their lives for what, whether they've taken it themselves, self-harm, or whether it's been as a means of payoff. But it is that important, and because of that, it's not just us as an organisation, but with our partners as well. It's really key that we all work together to understand and mitigate it and consider it as a real threat, as a real risk.
Definitely. I mean, for you guys on the call, and we've got a range of disciplines, we've got some people doing PhDs, etc. What's your thoughts on what you've seen so far?
Okay, I'll come off mute. Hi, I'm Lindsay. I'm a PSO based in the probation service in Reading. I came along today with, I thought I knew some things, but actually I think having listened to so far, I knew even less than I realised. So when you talked about the different sizing, so the stamp and the ID card and the values that would, what I don't think I understand is, I don't know sort of a better way to put it really, but so an A size piece of paper that would be worth £1,000. What's the like the use of that? How long would somebody be able to use that for, or how many people could make use of that? Do you see what I mean?
It's depends on individuals. Some may use it themselves and stash it, and our problem is it's hard for us to detect because it's invisible. It's not like we're walking along and we've got a block of something here. It's sprayed on, we don't know it's there, so we have to look at the various market factors, and we have so many intelligence gaps around spice and the spice use. So if you work on, we know a stamp size is used in one, so that gives it a slight indication. An ID card could last for maybe, depending on the potency of what it is, what's coming in. Because whereas we used to have testers when we had the smoking side of it, so some prisoners used to sample the ends of cigarette ends. We've got the unknown of how it's being tested at the moment, and that's because the regime is still slowly opening up. We're still got those prisons not going to work yet, so once we start knowing the regime, it becomes a bit more visible for us, so we can actually pick it up.
That's really helpful, thank you. Yeah, I think I just couldn't get my head around other drugs, we talk about it being a bag or a joint or this, and but now I understand why you said the stamp is so important because of that one use. Thank you, that's really helpful. Yeah,
the stamp goes in the vape, and that's why for ID cards, all prisons have ID cards, that's why they use the ID card side of it, so you carry it conveyed around on the back of it. An A4 sheet comes in as a letter, So we'll talk about some of the questions I see popping up there. We're going to answer them for you in a second. I know Wayne's giving some answers there as well. Okay, I'll carry on the presentation. I'm going to just go into a really catch-all and have a good conversation. Oh, am I back on, guys? Back in the room? So see how we talked about how lucrative it is. The concerns to prisons. The low cost of production of scars and high demand in prison means the sale of this form of PS is lucrative business for criminals both inside and outside the estate. I'm going to stop sharing. Have I stopped sharing now? What's on my screen, guys? Sorry.
So we can see the slides.
You can't see the slide.
Yeah.
Oh, good stuff. So the presence of PS in prisons has caused a very high level of harm. Most prisons have been affected by or witnessed the issue around health and violence directly related to its use and supply. Deaths and code blues. Let me just explain. Code blues is a code we have in prisons if somebody's suffering breathing difficulties, and we call a code blue, it gets the right health response with the right equipment. So deaths and code blues linked to scars use in custody have been reported, and the additional chemical and drugs often mixed with PS increase the health risks associated with use. So we've talked about what's it mixed with, different compounds, etc. It's further compounded by the dosage of PS on paper being uncontrolled and unpredictable. We just don't know. And that's the scary part about it. We don't know whether it's going to be heavy and give it a massive hit, which the difficulty we're finding is our lack of knowledge. And somebody might appear asleep or under the influence, and that's the hard thing for us to detect. So our risks are recognizing the problem. Like I say, we go into diagnostics in prisons, and some prisons don't even realize that there's an issue. And for us, because we've got experience, it becomes quite clear because we know what to look for, etc. We've talked about it being an invisible drug, predominantly paper-based. With reporting of under the influence. Well, certainly during the last 18 months or so, where prisoners could be asleep. I say there's nothing for them to get up for. Well, how do we know they're under asleep or they're not under the influence? Our reporting of intelligence. We know we've got quite a considerable gap in reporting of intelligence. That's through various factors, through current recruitment, current training, and also we've got COVID apathy, and we've got to be aware of that. We have an over-reliance on traditional countermeasures, and our drug dogs haven't detected PS for about 3 years. And we've talked about different, we're constantly playing catch up. We're in an arms race in effect to identify what's going on with PS and how we can move this forward. Our staff training, not prison officers, everybody, raising awareness of what PS is, what we can do to help, even just signposting support, because support is out there for it. And what we're not doing is, as prisoners, is we're not joining the dots. We're not correlating assault risks. We're not bringing everything together, because when you bring it together and the market forces come, the picture becomes very evident of what's actually happening. Now, prevention considerations. You got a leaking tap, you switch it off. So we discussed the PS journey. If you are identifying that you have a PS problem for prisons, then we recommend you photocopy and domestic mail. It's not just a case of the harsh point. We promote email alternatives. Email a prisoner. One thing which COVID, if you can take anything good out of COVID, was the digital aspect. Is that everybody has access to the internet or smartphone. Now we start promoting a digital approach, email. It gets to prisoners pretty much straight away. It's clean. It's not come through different aspects. We look at if you're going to receive cards or photographs, because again, family contact's absolutely vitally important. Well, let's do it direct from an internet company, so you can still get a good quality photographs. You get your cards from, not that we advertise any particular company, but an internet-based, your moon pigs, your funky pigeons, etc. Recently, in relation to legal mail, we ran a pilot for a unique reference number. What jumped out from that pilot was that we have quite a significant problem through the Rule 39 side of it. 18 prisons took part, and solicitors are invited to join the pilot, or it's now, as an active countermeasure, invited to join it. It's not mandatory, but what we found for those who actually did sign up for the URN, we didn't receive, we had one item which was questionable, whereas compared to the other prisons where you could clearly see Rule 39 mail was being abused. And so that report's now been published and the evidence is there for that. But we have legal visits, and unfortunately, we have a lot of companies out there set up by ex-prisoners to actually convey items into prisons, prison advice services, etc. And there's been quite a few arrests over recent years in relation to legal visitors bringing in PS, which were picked up through intelligence and been arrested. In some places, there was one establishment in the East Midlands where £750,000 worth of PS was found on a legal visitor. So, you know, what we look at is consider going paperless. So, where we did in early days, we did a survey amongst police, probation, and professional visitors and solicitors. We said, if you could just bring your laptop in, would that benefit you more? Overwhelming majority said yes, because otherwise, if we go down there, you go into prison, you've got to print off loads and loads of apps. So we make it paperless, allow laptops to come in. Some prisons have actually stopped staff bringing in paper altogether. And again, support that. This question, why do staff need to bring paper in? It's about protecting ourselves. If paper, well, as we've identified, paper-based PS is the issue, then let's stop it coming in. In terms of property, we look at implementing a mail order system for clothing, utilising approved suppliers, as per the IEP policy framework, which supports that. So we don't actually need to go through different loops and consultancy and face legal challenge. It's actually in the policy framework to move towards that. Where, as mentioned, where we are vulnerable is the amount of books being sent into prisons. We are seeing an increase, and it's a risk which we're having to manage at the moment, and we have the evidence we can challenge that from a judicial side again. And of course, request support from our team will always be there for you. Where we are at the moment, we launched Operation Illusion in March 22, which is in effect a PS task force. It's multi-agency, so it's not just us as drug strategy, it's us probation partners, APs, health, PPO, substance misuse support, police, to bring in people around the table to discuss exactly what we're doing here. What is the problem? What can we do about it? And how can we identify that? So, as mentioned earlier, you know, over 40% of fines, and this is what we're finding. Bear in mind, it's an invisible drug, and reporting's quite low. What we're actually finding, 40% of fines is scars coming through mail. That's how drugs, what we know, are entering the prison. So we're looking to explore that further. We aim to identify issues further related to PS ingress, like discussed on the previous slide there. Policy clashes. If we've got 12 policies we've identified relates to the ingress potentially of PS. So do they clash and do they counteract each other? Are we shooting ourselves in the foot? We need to look at the whole idea of illusion. Identify intelligence gaps, but also knowledge gaps, staff training, staff awareness, prisoner awareness. Did they know what they're actually taking? There's lots of gaps out there. There's lots of things we can do. And we're doing this operation in a tasking format. So we're a task force. So we're breaking it down as we come to parts. So we're building the picture. And there's no timescale set on this at the moment. It's ongoing until we feel it comes to the natural end. And the aim is to keep people alive, keep people safe, and to also protect families. We link to the county lines as well as we link to ADA. We've got an accelerator project which we're in lead on at the moment, all bringing that together. So I'll send, you'll receive a copy. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, just before you move on, there was a couple of hands went up. I think it was Clive first and then Claire. I don't know if you want to take the questions now.
Yeah, we'll take questions. I'll come out of this now, and then. So, was it Clive?
Yeah. Hi, Ian. I was just about typing my thing up. Yeah, with regards to the what was it, the email a prisoner, is there any way that could actually be used, or that could be directed, or made more of a requirement, I suppose, for actually engaging with prisoners and so on?
No, unfortunately, we can't because it's the right to communication, etc. But we'd recommend it as quite a lot, particularly as we moved on quite a lot digital wise, and certainly as digital in prison schemes become more and more popular. We definitely it's the same as a letter, the whole process. It does need advertising more. What we found where prisons have really put a push on email a prisoner, it's working quite well, but we're also generally, prisoners ain't really writing to each other because they've got in-cell telephony now, and the contacts tend to be there more verbal. And if you think of the world what we're in as well, it's not very. That's why it's quite intriguing when we see letters coming in, and some letters we have intercepted are literally gobbledygook, just words put on page in different parts, and then so they start to raise suspicion straight away. On I mean, the email a prisoner is there, and we always get the question, well, what if my granny on a deathbed writes to me and all that? We are human. We really do accept we will. So we might test it, but we are human, and that's it. But we try to promote ways, because we can't stress that this stuff is killing people. This stuff is destroying lives. This is the prominent drug in prisons. Prisons, while we love working in them for those who work in prisons, but they are not nice places. It's where vulnerable people are picked off, abused, and people are making money. Organised criminals are making a hell of a lot of money out of sometimes our confusion. And that's the whole idea of this conversation of Operation Illusion, to get these things right. And the key to get the joined up work. Because when we're releasing guys, we're releasing them into, they go into the community. Claire, I'll come to you in a second, see your hand up now. We're releasing into APs, but what we're finding more and more, and a recent diagnostic we've done this week, of prisoners who are deliberately failing either licensing community or Cat D status to convey items back into a closed prison. And the evidence is mounting on that.
I think that at senior management level, certainly within prisons and probation, it could be that prison sort of probation staff and then other agencies and so on are really directed to just use the email a prisoner scheme. I know I've used it, and I continually use it now, and I'd rather do that than actually send in paper mail. And I just feel that it really works, and obviously it's a way of saving lives, as you say.
Absolutely, Clive. And if we've worked with the PPO in the past about really utilising more electronic services, or if prisoners aren't photocopying mail, implement photocopying, but say implement it if you can evidence a threat. But yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, Clive. Claire, you next.
Thank you.
Yeah, you mentioned play plus legal visits, which made my heart sing a little bit. But is that realistic? I were in prison on a visit just to see staff recently. I had to take my smartwatch off. So I love the idea of being able to take us laptops in, but the risks associated with taking electrical goods into prison, does that outweigh the risk of the sky? Do you see what I mean? I can't see a lot of prisons agreeing to that. The prisons,
you'd be surprised actually that's being rolled out. It was one of the accelerator project decisions. Certain prisons are trying it. The rollout is becoming more and more. People are taking up that option. Yeah. What we recommend on diagnostic visits is that legal visits become paperless. The prison purchases a standalone printer with our paper. So should something need to be printed off for a signature, plug in, print it, and we'll do that. And in Anstey does the digital way. I've never seen a prisoner smoke a laptop yet. I've never seen it.
They can make other things out of the laptop. I think that's the issue, isn't it?
But that's the whole idea where we have our checks for coming in. You're coming in with a laptop, you're going out with a laptop, the serial number. You know, that it's a simplistic, it's a process issue. And prisons are buying more into that now because the associated risk, and particularly that arrest we had in East Midlands with £750,000 worth of PS, rarely sparked interest into this area, as you can imagine. I know from the MARSOC team who've done a few warrants in relation to that as well. So there's lots of work going on, but the more we can move towards a digital approach, the better, because it is. I mean, one of our big frustrations is we'll have a death in custody due to drug related, and our stock responses were invested in 100 million of airport style security. And as I quite often say, I've not come across a metallic drug yet. So, what was that question? I didn't hear. Whoa, 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 whoa. Who was that? Sorry, Sean? Sorry, Claire, you finished yet? That one?
Hi. Yeah, I was just going to mention about the probation aspect to it, because I work in a approved premises, but also that we have a very wide-ranging policy on alternatives to recall for this very reason, because we have identified that this was a deliberate act of getting recalled in order to ferry stuff back into custody. So there is quite a wide-ranging set of considerations as alternatives to recall. But it doesn't mean to say that people won't deliberately do ever increasingly risky stuff in order to definitely get back in, because the rewards are staggering. I was shocked to see the actual costs. The rewards are staggering. So of course and especially as you said, in this time of financial crisis, it's a great incentive too. So absolutely. And we are trying to use email a prisoner as well, because we normally send our communications to OMU in custody. But now if we can try and if we can get accounts set up, because it costs to send and you've got to have money on your account and all that. So it's a bit of a juggle, but I'm definitely pushing that in APs as well.
Brilliant, thanks, Sean. And what's just in response to the cost shadowing, there is work being developed at Look, and ultimately email a prisoner is a service provided. We are, as a HMPPS, looking an alternative to that and actually having our own, because theoretically speaking, email's free. So why are we charging to use that?
Yeah.
So let's just go to the chat and get some of the questions from the chat then. So bear with us a second, guys. I'm just going through. So when you've answered some of them.
I was just trying to be useful wherever I could, and
no, that's good. That's sensible. From Lana, are we considering using Kindles to help make sure prisoners don't lose access to books? There's lots of considerations taking place on the digital side of things, and Kindles have certainly been discussed very much so. But obviously there's cost implications there. There's also downloads, which is our biggest sort of standoffish when it comes to digital, is having access to internet and downloads. But no, definitely it's being considered. And we've also got to bear in mind in relation to books as well. We've got prison libraries who can access any book you want. And we seem to be losing sight of that and looking on the panic side of it. So great question, Lana. Hopefully that answers that for you.
Thanks.
Robin, what's required to implement preventative considerations? Do you have to support access required resource to do so? The preventative stuff in relation to paper side of things, Robin, it's pretty much free. It's about thinking outside the box. Take, for example, if we photocopy domestic mail, we're stopping it coming in. One of the areas agreed with policy is that we will give the prisoner 3 options. One, they can post the original out again at their own cost, but it's at least the drugs ain't coming into the prison. Second one, they can hand it out on visits. And the third one is we will destroy it. So we're not putting it in a bag and giving it on property, as identified in the summer when we had a number of prisoners who had just been released, unfortunately died due to overdose. In terms of the legal side of it, we have the unique reference number pilot, and also we can pick up a phone and say to solicitors are correctly badging up, and this is the issue. If I get a letter comes to me, I can say a letter and it just says legal mail on it. According to our current guidance and policies, I have to treat that as a legal letter. Now, Wayne's my ex-cellmate. So I've just sent him a letter and I thought, I know the system, so I'm going to write legal mail on it. And I've sent a load of letters, so to PS. So we have to then start doing countermeasure checks. So, right, well, is this a proper solicitor's company? That's why we recommend the unique reference number, and I'll talk about something in a second, digital. But bring up, check on prison nomus. Is the prisoner's visitor linked to this firm? In some prisons, is the prisoner got any outstanding cases? Why are they getting Rule 39 letters? You know, family law is not Rule 39. It's about thinking like that. Looking at, sometimes, I mean, Bernie and I look at the absolute obvious things at times. It comes out. So did you see Sam, did your hand go up then? Yes,
Yeah, hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
So this is not really related to the point you're discussing, so I don't know if you want to finish what you're saying and I can sort
Okay,
of...
no problem. I'll say that. So you say, Robinson, then in terms of resources, there's lots we can do in our current gift. Now, what is being rolled out at the moment is digital barcoding for legal visits, for legal mail. It's very much in the pilot area, but we expect something more at the end of this year. But the support which prisons will get is us. Myself, Wayne, Bernie. We've got lots of documentation we can send you. We'll come and sit with you and we'll help you set it all up. We are very much here for you because we can't stress enough. Our mission is we want to keep people alive from this drug. The only way we can do that is to stop it coming in. Is that answer?
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I'm a project manager. So that's probably from my side. I'm really interested in the practicalities of how you're implementing it, and this is just absolutely fascinating. So yeah, thank you. That does really help.
No problem. Quite happy to help in that. Sorry, Sam, do you want to go ahead before I go down on the...
Hi, yeah. Firstly, thanks for this really interesting discussion. I'm a PhD student and which is focusing on synthetic cannabinoids. So this is all really helpful. And it's interesting to hear that a lot of the conversations that I'm hearing today, and also sort of the general narrative, in white papers in the drug strategy, is around prevention from drugs coming in, from preventing supply. Obviously, that's very important, but there is, I think, a real lack of conversations around treatment in prisons for people who are using spice, and how can we help people, stop using or essentially not want to use them. And hopefully we're going to be doing some research in HMP Bristol soon. But having gone in there, having conversations with some of the treatment staff, the clinical staff there, they just say, well, we really have no options. And this is of course a problem with spice use in the community too. People just don't really engage with treatment, and there really isn't any options for treatment. But are there conversations about this happening? Are there similar conversations with clinical staff? So I notice a lot of people in this call are sort of criminal justice based. Are there any clinical care staff that are having similar conversations? Are there lots of funding options available from HMPPS or the Ministry of Justice that are investing in research around treatment to solve this issue?
Okay, in relation to the National Drug Strategy, comes on 3 standards: reducing supply, reducing demand, and building recovery. And with the recent Prisons White Paper, there's a lot of focus on abstinence. And we think abstinence takes different forms, but actually, look, we use an analogy. If you look at a prison and you look at your population of prison, everybody knows the top 10% problem prisoners. The ones who were smashing up, the ones who were assaulting, we know their names. Oh, it's Bernie again. We also know the names of the prisoners, consistent self-harmers, the 10% of self-harmers, always getting themselves in debt, always looking to, really struggling there. What we don't know is the name of the 80% in the middle. And that's where we fail. The guys who come in and just get on with the time, who, might, if I have a bad day, I'll probably go for a pint at the end of the day. If people in prison have a bad day, the likelihood they're going to look to use something. just to take them away for that little bit. So this is where, when we talk about the substance misuse teams, we talk about recovery. Numbers are actually quite small, so that's why when we're talking now the abstinence agenda, we have a process called incentivized substance-free living. What we're looking to bring in ISFL units, and these units are for people, low-level users, and those who are abstaining from drugs, to take people away from it. If you know that television program Time recently, the Sean Bean character will be perfect candidate for an ISFL. Somebody just wants to get on with the time, not be bothered with the drugs trade. And what we found with the ISFL units, we've got 24 set up across the country at the moment, is if we take a step back, if we put a prisoner through recovery and they're coming through script and they're reducing, what do we do with them at the end of it? Right, you finished on the recovery unit now, back into the main wing, back into the lion's den. Well, actually, that's not going to help anyone because the temptation's so much there. Whereas by bringing on the ISFL units, it's a place where prison house where support is there. It's working in tandem with SMS teams, with supports. Sorry, SMS, there's a substance misuse service where support's there. The investment in, I mean, particularly in relation to spice, from that side of it, there isn't a structured training package. Now, there's one been developed by some of our colleagues working in Forward Trust SMS service, which are quite happy for us to roll out. Each other SMS services are developing their own at the moment, but what we're trying to find is some consistency. Now, we had a great presentation on Operation Illusion last week by the, Wayne, help me out, what's it, the Cannabis Spice Legal High Support Group for Claire. It's actually based in Bradford. And what worried us from that aspect is that the projection is that the spice issue is going to be with us certainly for a minimum of 20 years. And that's from what the information them guys are receiving. We're very much on the same page. So when it comes to recovery and choices, it's about giving options. What we've tried to punish our way out of drug use for 25 years in HMPPS, and it doesn't work. It hasn't worked. Our numbers are as high as they were. We've now got to actually switch that, and that's where the ISFL work is really working well. And Sam, quite happy, if you want to email me separately, quite happily take you into the unit and show that. Because, you know, yes, it is about choices, but when we can actually, we need to stop the supply of it, because the pressure being put on people, that's talked about, paper put under doors and being charged rent. We've got to break the criminal side of it. We've got to recognise the county lines links. We've got to recognise the police support, the probation support. You know, when we're putting prisoners out on licence, are we thinking about it properly? It does almost sounds like we need to create HMP utopia, but actually there's lots of things in place we've got now which we can use in action, and it's communication. I've always said we get three things right in this world: communication, support, and consistency. If we can get them three things right, we'll go a long way in helping people, because no structured boundaries where they are. So I hope that answers your questions with a bit of a long debate. There's lots of work going on in prisons and in the communities, because we are linking the ISFL process from category A all the way down to Cat D and now APs. We're holding off on the AP side of things just purely and simply because we haven't got the resource at the moment, as in physical people to do it. But the plans are in place, the discussions are taking place. But ultimately, the drive for ISFL is actually the community, as in the prison community and the outside community. It's about people making their choices. And, you know, you can choose to go down right and be anti everything and kick back, or actually say, you know what, I don't want that. And there's a great story I'll tell you about a prison in relation to the ISFL. There's a guy called Michael. He was at HMP Humber. And when we were setting up the ISFL HMP Humber had had a riot on Christmas Day in 2018. 2019, Wayne and I were tasked with setting up an ISFL at Humber. So we're doing a presentation to the prisoners, talking along, and this guy says, well, I'm an IPP. Drug testing's not part of my thing. I'm not doing this. I said, not a problem, mate. Pack your kit, because you won't be living on here. Being quite direct with that. We went back a few months later. Michael, big lad, comes running up to me. I thought, oh shit, what's going on here? So, Ian, I'm sorry. I said, what do you mean, Michael, you're sorry? I'm sorry, you were right, I was wrong. I said, well, what do you mean by that? I said, my family like me now. My daughter likes to come and visit me now. The only thing what's changed, boss, is where to live. I thought, wow, if I could bottle that. So it's not about, we've for ages been trying to punish our way out of drug use. We've been telling people we think we know what's right. We create drug-free wings. They're the places where prisoners go to get drugs. We create enhanced wings. That's where all the organisations go from. So Wayne's took the learning from them, developed the ASFL concept, and Danny and myself are building on that now. And it's about taking our learning and going, we haven't got the answers. The lads have the answers. You know, it's funny, yes, what incentives would people like to stop using drugs? You're not getting Gordon Ramsay kitchens, jacuzzis. You're getting simple things like, could we have kettles? Could we have a DVD to watch? Simple things, but what making life better there. So there's lots of work going on, Sam, in relation to the abstinence side as well, which brings it together. Abstinence promotes recovery.
Yeah, Sam, I'll just add to that. So looking at, I know Ian's, I had to step out for a bit, so I didn't hear all of what Ian said, but I know, you know, the ISFL sort of ethos is that we want to create a space in the prison where the social norm is not to take drugs. Because what we're doing, and as Ian said, when we put people back into normal location, they're surrounded by people that want to feed on that vulnerability. And we need to create a safe space in the prison where people can continue to progress. There isn't a clinical intervention for spice. So there's no OST, it's all psychosocial, and it is about creating that environment where people want to continue that change process. And that's what we've been trying to develop over the last 2 years. Bristol is, you know, we've been to Bristol a couple of times, so I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts are as well on that.
Yeah, well, hopefully this is going to come out in the research that we're doing. We've just applied to, or we're in the process of applying to HMPPS research, the research board. And, you know, part of what we're doing is looking at sort of general features of spice use in prison, but also asking prisoners, you know, what would help you stop, or why are you not using it at the moment, or why are you using it at the moment, and just sort of getting that prisoner-led information to inform, hopefully, to inform decisions around, around treatment. So, you know, fingers crossed the research gets accepted and we're able to do this. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting to hear all of the things you say. I mean, it's very difficult to get this information as a PhD student. You know, it's so yeah. I mean, maybe I could. This is a case for a separate conversation we have outside of this call. But I'd love to sort of hear more about some of the stuff going on, if possible.
Quite happy to. And the idea of doing this on the inside circle is to spread the word. We've got a problem. We can't solve it. We've got to solve it together as a team, everybody. So hopefully that certainly helps out.
Nice one, cheers, guys.
Hey, Claire.
Hiya, yeah, I just wanted to go back to something Sam said about not being able to offer treatment for people that are using spice, or as part any community drug services, drug services in prison. We work around behaviours, so the substance is different to that. And I think prior to COVID, we saw a massive increase in the mutual support and the peer support within prisons, and prisons were really getting on the drugs agenda. COVID come and just smashed that all to bits. And the work that I'm currently doing with the prisons is how we rebuild that with the knowledge. So I think for me, the opposite of addiction is inclusion. So it is around them environments, isn't it? It's about creating a recovery community and everybody supporting each other. Recovery Steps is part of Humankind, which is big organisation, and I know in Leeds they have a massive spice problem within their homeless community, which is impacting the city centre. They've actually put a spice rehab pathway in place, which we can mirror. I think the problem you've got both in the prisons and in the community for the psychosocial interventions to be productive, there's got to be the want and there's got to be the motivation, hasn't there, to do that. It can't be forced, it can't be bribed. If they're not willing to put the work in, it won't work for them.
No, you're absolutely right. And then we're hoping, what's one of our big frustrations, as we're unlocking the regime, and as you know, as we're now, I mean, COVID's disappeared now, hasn't it? Whatever. But as the regimes are now returning back to normal, we are really getting drug strategy back on the agenda. And a lot of the work, there's been some fantastic work done by SMS teams. Humankind's brilliant, Forward Trust are brilliant. You know, that's just naming two. There's plenty of really good work going on out there. But a lot of the decisions was not to go into prisons during COVID. And one of the early narratives in relation to COVID was, well, drugs are stopped now because there's no visits. Well, drugs not been coming in for visits for a long time. And as we were talking about how the drugs are, we know the drugs are coming in, but the drugs changed. It's not your heroin, it's not your cannabis anymore. It's paper-based PS is your drug of choice in prisons. And that, so we need to recognise that, change that narrative, and then we can deal with it and work from that. So hopefully get there. Sean, your hand up.
Yeah, just to kind of go back to, you were talking about, you know, the journey of your project, and you're coming towards APs. Obviously, you're working in AP, but there's a big initiative at the moment in APs. We've just had a private members bill passed and given royal assent for drug testing in approved premises, which widens our scope to test and do anonymised sampling of all sorts of substances and stuff to understand what is actually, you know, passing through literally the people in our care. So we'll have a better understanding of the, you know, legal, illegal, street or whatever substances going through. But there's also quite a big structure being put in place, and approved premises, national approved premises team are putting together regional drug strategy leads. So I don't know whether you're linked in with them and Shelley Smith and all of that. Yes,
we work very closely with Shelley. And Shelley's aware. We actually had a conversation with Shelley the other day. She's part of Operation Illusion as well. Cool. So you've really got a seat at the table on this one, and it's for us as well. It's recognising that risk on both sides, and the conveyance aspect and the development for the AP world. I mean, let's be honest, you were the forgotten P, but you're very much not from our side of it. You're very much part of the centre of our thinking, and as we develop, we'll get that sorted.
Is it just another thought in terms of the paper under the door sales method?
Yeah.
I mean, from the olden days, it used to be called Unsolicited Goods Act. It's now the Distance Selling Regulations. Is it possible, if you can identify people doing this, to prosecute them under those types of legislation, just to get them on something, if nothing else?
There's lots of work going on around that. That was very much a tactic during the COVID regime. As we're now coming out of the COVID regime, it's facing different threats. But the paper-based threat is the key one. That's right. The more and more we can promote digital solutions from that, the better.
Yeah, but if somebody's putting paper under a door unsolicited, that's a selling technique which is illegal in its own right. So there's always another piece of legislation because I was only interested that in somebody who was a prison officer who was attacked by somebody throwing urine at them. Yeah. A very creative police officer found a very old piece of law around administering noxious substances and got that person convicted of a much stronger sentence than if they were just, you know, being prosecuted for something less minor. So it's about how creative we get. And I know punishment isn't the answer, we've talked about, but in these sort of key pinch points, I think there has to be as many possible ways to kind of every pun intended, arrest the operational arm of it, and then once you caught hold of the problem, you can look towards treatment. But it's finding ways to stop it, I think, and that's
absolutely.
And I know.
Sorry,
yeah, go on. I was going to say, I know we're struggling to find ways to detect stuff in APs because obviously they're officially in community and they have an awful lot of stuff in their room that they can legitimately have different from prison. So understanding how we can detect stuff will be really important as well.
One of the biggest issues we're having at the moment, Sean, is the identification that it's a problem. Now, well, it's really raising itself and coming on well, but identifying that actually we've got a problem, because some prisons still think they don't. Some prisons still think we're racing it on code blues. So we haven't had a code blue for a while. No, we've been locked up for 2 years. That's why we've not had code blues for a while, because we're not finding it. We're not seeing it under the influence. But actually, when you take other market forces into play, it's actually very much prevalent there. And you're looking at, for example, we talked about the journey. When prisons start photocopying domestic mail, the actual number of letters coming in goes down, but the number of Rule 39 legal letters shoots up. And again, for example, we're in a Category D prison this week, getting 15 Rule 39 letters a week in. There's absolutely no need for that to be coming into a Category D prison because they've been through the full sentence and they're coming in. So it's sometimes I talked about joining the dots and spotting the obvious, and that's the big fight at the moment for us. That's what we're really pushed as a diagnostic team. When we get there, we can move on. And in fairness, we're getting there slowly and surely. And we're going to start moving to a workshop structure about how we can, sit down. Let's discuss it, because we're all here sat on Teams. You can't get much done. We got an hour and a half. We will go over, so don't worry about that. Feel free to drop off. But we've been structured to set times, looking at a square. When you actually get people in a room and start, you can ask one question which will last you an hour. We can't do that in this forum, and this is why when we talk, yes, while technology is good in that, you still can't beat the person-to-person contact, and that's what we really need. And that's particularly in the drugs world, we need to have that conversation, that one-to-one. Bernie will tell you that the work Bernie does. Sorry, Sam.
Yeah, I just wanted to chip in with some on the conversations about detection, because part of work I'm doing for my PhD and some colleagues are doing at the University of Bath as well is about improving detection methods for spice. And some hopefully a new piece of kit is being trialled at HMP Bristol soon, and it's basically going to be a very easy point of care test where you can just sort of scan pieces of paper and it will sort of immediately tell you whether there's spice on that or not. And it's a generic test for SCRA, so it doesn't really matter, so it won't matter. So the problems you mentioned about the arms race and new compounds coming and displacing improvements we've had before, this won't be an issue, hopefully. So hopefully that sort of equipment is going to be improving soon, and I'm going to be doing some work as well looking at whether we'll be able to test that in saliva as well. So I'm hopefully going to be doing some work in that in the community, but if possible it'd be great to have a look at some resources for collaboration with approved premises and even potentially in a prison too. So
definitely the insight things about meeting each other, making contacts, support things, so we've got all of that. And in terms, I hope this machine does work. We've tried so many, we've got different things out there. It's what we're finding, the reason why it's a drug of choice, because we changed the compounds, molecular compounds of it, and I'm not a chemist, and that's how we're evading our testing. And it's identified as 44 strands of a drug which wouldn't register on our MDT panel. Tells us we've got a problem, and that's with the arms race. So if it works, great, fantastic, and let's get it rolled out. There are some good ideas out there in relation to oral fluid testing. We fought hard to get that for the open estate, so all open prisons now, and as we move towards the ISFLs, because part of the ISFL is drug tested as well, and it's not testing for the punitive side, it's testing for the support side of it. Because again, we talk about perceptions of families, and you're all doing drugs in prison. Well, actually, when you can evidence, no, I'm not. I've got certificates saying I'm not. Just that the hearts and minds is how we manage drug strategy, and if we get that more, the better. But no, Sam, certainly I'll contact you separately.
Nice one. Cheers.
So we've got no questions. Let's go through the comments again. Ramby, prisons that have installed technology, which means prisons have access to laptop. However, essentially lost the legal battle of books. Absolutely bang on. The books is our problem. It's common. We know it's a problem, and in fairness to the policy team, they know it's a problem. So we are in the evidence gathering process at the moment to actually go for a challenge with that. But we will need a fair bit of evidence to gather that too. But work is going on with that. Isabel, would you say PS supply is being taken seriously enough in terms of custodial punishment, adjudications out of days, or is it also playing catch up a bit? Is it something that will be referred to police investigation? Oh, what a question that is. Isabel, in relation to that.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to come in and say that Lana and I are working on, and I think we have spoken to Wayne a bit about this, but we're working on adjudications and independent adjudications, and kind of basically picking up, if we can, things that aren't getting through the police route. But yeah.
No, that's a brilliant question. And in terms of part of the thing is finding it, identifying it, prisons recognising there's a problem for it. In terms of the IA, it's getting the independent adjudicator to come in. In terms of us as well, let's look at it as well. Do we really want to go down the punishment route? Obviously, there's got to be some sanctions in there, but it's about striking that balance as well. I think very much the case conference approach works, but there's only so much you can go, hang on a minute, excuse the pun, but you're taking the piss now. Let's move on, let's action something. And so we have a long way to go. And the key thing is, first of all, recognising the problem. Then what are we charging on? We've got a piece of paper here. Our trace detection's not helping that, We can only use it as an indicator. How can we prove it's that? So Wayne, go on. Do you want to take over on that?
Well, yeah, just I didn't realise that was you. Sorry. I think the main issue for us is separating the user from the dealer as well. So those that are, continuing criminal activity for monetary gain, that needs to have as much sanction as we can put to it. But those that are using or maybe dealing to pay for drug use, I think need to be directed into treatment and support rather than more punishment. And we don't have that separation at the moment within our tariff. So there are things going on, as you know, we've discussed around supportive adjudication process and linking into treatment and recovery more so now than we have done before. But again, that again reflects Ian's comments as well, as that actually we can't detect it. Our searching processes aren't particularly great in finding it at the moment. But when we do that, we need to have those processes in place to make sure that we deal with the person appropriately.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Isabel. Andy, I'm just going through the list here on the chat. So if you join me if you want to go. We can't resist people sending books in. Could we change the way we do it? Like so I mentioned earlier, Kindle idea, or that there's an approved supplier who families could order books from. So it's not stopping the ability to buy some books. You're very much on our page, Andy, 100% there. However, the judicial review says we have to allow books to be sent in a physical form at the moment. And it's very frustrating, but we're fighting it. We'll gather the evidence and we get there. So the issue with the Kindles is the downloading aspect. If we can find a way to get around that, obviously we've got child protection measures, witness protection measures, etc. We need to take into account in terms of having open access to internet. But it's not to say it's not going to come in the future as we go. Emily, is it common for prisoners to have to resort to drug smuggling and dealing in prison as a way of earning money? Interesting. And prison poverty is a big problem for prisoners who don't have families to send them money, so phone calls sent in. If we paid them better with phone calls, basically cheaper. Oh wow, Emily, join our team. Everything what you're saying there is fantastic. You're on here, Emily, still?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the cost of the BT phones is astronomical. We know a lot of the phone smuggle in prison is literally just that, to keep contact with the families, and earning money. There's the argument it's well above my pay grades, but in relation to minimum wage, and particularly because we have a large number of contracts which prisons provide for the outside community. Like even just wrapping the cotton buds up for Virgin Atlantic is done down south in the prisons there. So absolutely, this we recognise this very much from the demand reduction aspect. We speak a lot with heads of reducing reoffenders in prisons and looking at what work we can bring in. But of course, we should be also recognising the skill set of the people coming to prison. Any one of us can end up in prison, any one of us, and we've got to recognise that. And it's presenting them opportunities as we go there. And if people are coming to prison, we do lots of work with care leavers as well. and it's looking at what we can do, what's in our gift. And there's a lot of innovative thinking taking place at the moment. And what's really healthy for us in a way is that, lucky enough, a lot of prisons use the COVID time for thinking outside the box. I think that's very much where we need to be now to move forward, particularly with the drugs problem. You know, we can't stress enough, drugs is the currency of the world, the currency of this country, and the fact that the PS market is targeted at prisons, and we need to get alternatives from the highly addictive side. We need to keep people busy. So absolutely right. I think that's a really, really good comment and question. Thanks, Emily.
Thank you.
So did you answer that one there, Wayne, with the police crime prisons? Isabel went to Isofel Wing at Pentonville recently, and the environment was lovely. People clearly really appreciated living there and felt so calm. Really good. The Pentonville Isofels, we're really proud of that and the work what's gone on at Pentonville and the drive, not only by the governor of Pentonville, but the staff involved and the prisoners working there. We recently visited as well just to have an update, and we're very impressed with the way it's going. And you know, if you can do something like that in Pentonville, you can do it anywhere, and that's what we really want to get, that push and enthusiasm for that. So thanks for that, Isabel. Okay, there's some piece of work going on at the moment to team safety around prisoner paying debt. Yeah, we're aware of that. Thank you. And it's recognising debt management is an issue. It's linked to PS massively. It's definitely linked to drug strategy, and there's some joined up work going on between our teams in getting that rollout and support in prisons as we go forward. Let's go for expanded clothes manufacturing in prisons. That prisons can sell clothes for income. That's an interesting one, Lana. And there's lots we can do. We've got a workshop system. We've got a captive workforce. So 79,000 people in prison. We just need people more to think outside the box. Now, Wayne leads a lot on stuff like that and getting people to think. And we link this to ISFL. So it's there's a lot we can do. It's about distraction, getting people focusing away. But one of our great success stories is, of course, Cell Workout. LJ Flanders and the work what LJ has done now and developed his own social enterprise, and he actually sells his clothes in Next now, which is so it's about thinking, giving people opportunities to move forward and develop like that. And that's it down to all the questions done. We've got a couple of minutes left on the schedule, but quite happy to discuss anything with anyone. Any other questions from the floor in relation to anything PS or drug strategy related? You're all on mute. Come on, turn your mute off. Okay, no questions. Then really, thank you very much, everybody, for your time this morning. I hope you found it useful. Our contact details, I say, it was hmppsdrugstrategy@gov.uk is our functional mailbox. My email is ian.adams@justice.gov.uk. Please get in contact. Any questions? We'll talk to you about the work, what's going on. We're also interested in sharing your expertise and listening to you and what you can bring to it. So with that, you have 2 minutes left if you've got a meeting scheduled for past. Thanks very much, everybody. And let's say we are here to help and support you as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.